All right, you guys don't want to miss this one. It is going to be breaking down what is in store for stablecoins, but also what is happening on more of a global footprint. There's a lot of things happening around the G20 that may have some influence on the crypto markets, I think, in a long-term scenario. And we're going to break all that down for you today. I think you'll like it. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into Tech Path. Let's get started with the topic of an alternative stablecoin and what that might look like. This was FX Street kind of coming in on CEO Brian Armstrong talking about stablecoin hot take. This is the whole idea around Flatcoin. He mentioned this. I'll show you the video here in a second. But basically, he told Yahoo Finance, basically in an interview, that the next iteration of stablecoins, Flatcoin, is on the horizon for the exchange. Now, the point is, will and are exchanges like Coinbase really going to focus in on this? And one of the things that I think is interesting here is the fact that we're seeing Coinbase move in this direction almost in unison and lockstep with what's happening in DC. And a lot happening this month. Most likely we'll have a House vote on stablecoins, and it's very possible we could get some regulatory clarity. So I think they are queuing up for it. And when I say they, meaning Coinbase, queuing up for it. Remember, they recently listed that they were doing or going to list PayPal stablecoin on the exchange as well. So the idea behind these Flatcoins is kind of interesting. There was a video here on this. Let me just jump over here to this video real quick. And this is where he kind of breaks it down, but listen into what he had to say.
And so what would it look like to have a better form of money in the crypto space? Well, it'd be something that's decentralized and maybe tracks CPI. So CPI is the consumer pricing index. It essentially has a basket of goods underlying it, things that people spend their money on, a place to live, transportation, commodities like, food and energy and wheat and, copper, things like that. And so that is a good property of money. We want our money to preserve its purchasing power.
All right, so I'm going to stop it there. Want our money to preserve purchasing power, and the idea around tracking this against things like the consumer price index, which is highly connected to inflation in general. And I think, there are some interesting scenarios that maybe play into this for what they're trying to do. And I would agree with what Brian is talking about. Now, remember, this video that he just did was the ideas that they were trying to get behind. These are the ideas that they feel should be in the marketplace and would support. And they had a whole line list of 10 different great ideas that, Coinbase didn't have time to build everything. So it's something that I think a lot of markets are now starting to understand maybe how this connects to more of a global aspect. A couple other points, to kind of hit within this. Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong also said the company is working on the next generation version of stablecoin, and that there may be a new SEC chair by 2024. So he's definitely maybe either that's wishful thinking or something else. But they're also talking about donating to a presidential candidate who supports cryptocurrency. I think right now with Ramaswamy, he's probably the one that most likely will be maybe a candidate that could go in that direction, along with RFK Jr. So there's some interesting political scenarios playing into that. And when you think about political, and how that plays into it, you have to look on the global scale of things. But I look at Coinbase also just in their current size, because Coinbase, I think, is one of those, kind of the tail that wags the dog kind of companies. And if you look at just where they are currently, there's just this here recent data. This is their Coinbase revenue and usage stats for 2023. There's a lot here. I mean, first of all, Coinbase expecting to get revenue around 7.3 billion in 2023, which is a significant increase of 2 billion just in Q2 of 2021. That's a very big jump in a market in which has been almost a full bear market since 2021. So that's a big deal. Also, in terms of user stats, let me kind of zoom in on that for you guys. Projected to have around 150 million verified users by the end of 23. Now, the reason I think that's important is when you look at what happened with PayPal, we talked about this. If you haven't watched our PayPal video, go check it out, because PayPal has around 450 million users, another 50 million Venmo users. So 500, half a billion people, but only a small fraction of that might use the PayPal stablecoin. Versus if you look at Coinbase, projecting 150 million verified users by the end of 2023. That is a much more captivated audience, because I would say for anybody that's on Coinbase, most likely you're probably talking in excess of 50 to 60% that are holding stablecoins. And especially right now where Coinbase is rewarding USDC holding with a high percentage of yield interest that's being paid. So when you think about that, the size of the market, then all of the implications that rolls into the global spec of things, and then the size of Coinbase themselves and the number, remember, they're a global company and they're growing and continuing to grow outside the US, could become very interesting for what is going to happen around the stablecoin market. Another factor that you might want to look at is what's happening with the European Central Bank this week ahead of the ECB taking center stage, as the euro is obviously dealing with some challenges here. A couple of things I wanted to look at. Problem for the euro is interest rate differentials, even though the Fed is expected to hold rates steady later this month, and the ECB is expected to squeeze in another hike when it meets on Thursday next week. The interest rate differential between the German and the US one-year bond or yield is around 1.8%. This is a problem for the future of what is happening in the European Union. And I think this is also playing out globally. Now, why is this interesting or important around stablecoins? Because if stablecoins start to become a regulatory product and become very active within the financial system, we're going to start seeing a lot of countries adopting the use case for stablecoins, which will only cause massive growth. Now, you look at other major Western countries. Let's take a look at Canada. Canada's economy now unexpectedly shrinking. Central bank is most likely going to hold rates. Now, this is another factor that concerns me, at least, when you look at economies shrinking, especially one of our friends, being here from the U.S., the economy unexpectedly contracted in the second quarter at an annualized rate of 0.2% of the growth, which was likely flat in July. So this is all coming in just here recently. And the Canadian economy may already have fallen into a modest recession. So again, this goes back into the impressions that we're going to be dealing with in terms of the total aspect of many other countries dealing with all of these pressures coming in. And again, stablecoins are one of those things that start to open up very interesting use case scenarios. And I think this is the thing that we will continue to look at. US dollar, this is another scenario. US dollar at resistance right now, zone ahead of US inflation report. We anticipate we're going to see a little bit more hike in terms of an inflation number, most likely above what is being expected. US dollar chart is trading at a resistance zone wave right now. And if you look at the history of this, I mean, it has had a little bit of a zone right here that it's been in. Many analysts now are expecting this to be a downward pressure. Now, what happens when the Dixie starts to slide? And then also what's happening in the global climate, because this is a very important control mechanism that will eventually start to bleed into central banks and then eventually some sort of digital currency. And I've got some clips here I'm going to play at the end to kind of support my theory on this of where they're going and the likelihood of this use. Another factor on this is when the Fed is going to start cutting, because this will start, of course, to recorrect the market. Once we start to see a pivot, everything changes. Maybe we come out of this recession or the recession we're likely to go into. A couple of points to look at is historically. I want to show you something here. Let me kind of zoom in on this chart. So this was the Fed fund rate back in 2006, right there before the bottom fell out from under us in 2007 and 8. And then this is essentially was when we started to see all these rates. And this was our pretty much free money, we'll call it, right there in that zone outside of what happened right here, which we all know on pandemic. But this is the growth coming out of that before we hit that. Had that continued to grow, the question would be, would we have continued to see this kind of accelerant? Because this, remember, very sharp incline here because of how fast the Fed funds rate has been changed and held. The real question will be, will Chair Powell continue to track along with what's happening with the CPI, with inflation, and will he continue to hold the rate or possibly get another lift before year end? If you look at what's happening around the world, this is where it gets kind of interesting. A couple of points I want to hit on. This is Christine Lagarde, president of the EU. Listen to what she had to say, because I think the EU is about in a position where they're trying to do a little bit of an end around the United States. Biden was at this G20. Listen in.
It's been 2 years since we launched PGII, a joint vision by the world's leading economies to invest in the infrastructure that low and middle income countries need. And 2 years on, more large-scale projects are seeing the light, and we are presenting two of them today. First, the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. This is nothing but historic. It will be the most direct connection to date between India, the Arabian Gulf, and Europe, with a rail link that will make trade between India and Europe 40% faster, with an electricity cable and a clean hydrogen pipeline to foster clean energy trade between Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, with a high-speed data cable to link some of the most innovative digital ecosystems in the world. And
all right, so I'm going to stop it there. So what Lagarde is talking about is a deal that they've constructed with Iran, with Saudi, and with India. And all of that does not include the United States. Now, this is the same kind of scenario that plays out in the BRICS nations as to whether or not they're going to have enough of a GDP pressure within the global perspective to put pressure on the dollar. Now you've got the EU coming in. They haven't joined BRICS, but they're starting to partner up with a lot of BRICS countries to enhance trade. Now, again, all that does is puts a lot of pressure on the US dollar. If we start to see less and less of the dollar usage, we will start to see that decline. That's the opportunity where we might see a shift moving into stablecoins and also, obviously, things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc., digital assets. So all of this plays into a very interesting time. Further into this, you have to think about who are the power players in Europe that could be getting into this. Who are the ones that we've been looked at and worried about the most? Germany. Let's play this clip.
Germany's economy is struggling. 2 consecutive quarters of declining output spells recession, and GDP has stagnated at the level of the previous 3 months. The important economic indicators are pointing in the wrong direction, and economists are worried. Not just the economists, ordinary Germans are worried too, and pessimistic about the future, which spells trouble for politicians and fears of a far-right surge.
All right, so what is happening in Germany is that we're dealing with a lot more pressure on their economy. And again, remember, they are one of the pivotal players in the EU ecosystem. If they continue to see a lot of pressure, which many people would claim that the US has inflicted upon Germany for many reasons, whether you get into conspiracy theories or anything like that, the point is it's real and it's happened. Germany is going to have to make a decision on how they resurrect their economy. Again, this puts more pressure on them working out trade opportunities within the EU or possibly within the BRICS nations. Again, this goes into a lot of opportunity on the future of how the US dollar and the stablecoin starts to play into the global market. I want to play this last clip for you. This is Jeremy Allaire, and he goes into this on the Unchained podcast, and he gets into some interesting points here. Let me play this one.
I'm curious to get your take. I know that you have to be very diplomatic about it because they are a competitor and whatever, but like, I would love to hear you talk shit about PayPal USD and why you think it's going to fail miserably.
Well, I mean, look, I like there's a lot of different things that I would say. I think the first is that, you know, today for dollar stable coins, right, there are 2 that have a pretty significant and entrenched position. And you know, some that entrenched position is concentrated in certain emerging markets or Asian markets or certain centralized exchange platforms. And that's, you know, slow to shift. And then I think, you know, for USDC, like we're pretty entrenched in DeFi and I think more broadly in kind of payment applications where, you know, traditional firms are comfortable, you know, adopting that and using that. And actually, just as a note, like, I think at the heart of this, when we think about this from a Circle perspective, is we really think about what we do as providing market neutral infrastructure. It's really important to how we think about what we do. We think about USDC as a network utility as like an internet network utility, and it's a market neutral network utility, market neutral network infrastructure. We're like a
All right, so what he's hitting on here, a couple of things, remember, is that he was kind of taking a dig at PayPal. In case you guys don't know, Jeremy Allaire, CEO at Circle, the creator of USDC, took a dig at PayPal as an experimental asset coming onto the Coinbase network. The other scenario is a market neutral position that USDC, Circle, is trying to take. This means that we could be looking at a much more global appeal toward all of these struggling economies, which we've already started to see in the EU, Germany, and in some cases in Asia. And he had even mentioned to the power that Tether is currently holding in certain Asian markets. So this is a bit of a power struggle right now that is happening in the stablecoin market. The question is who is going to be the winner? And I think that's the one you have to be watching very closely. Obviously, Circle tied to the Ethereum ecosystem as an ERC20 token, but also the potential of them getting into, and he even mentioned, into the payment systems and into the DeFi market, which I think are two of the critical things that you should be tracking when you look at any kind of stablecoin. This is the thing I think that we'll continue to look at over the next few months as to the power of the stablecoin if we do get regulatory clarity, especially around how this starts to spread on a global aspect, because this will be a bigger impact, I think, for the industry. Last up here, just to give you guys a heads up, is there is a hearing this week on the oversight of the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission. That would be the SEC. And we've talked about this before. We'll try to get you some breakdowns of that. This is where Gensler goes in front of this commission. And it's really about the oversight that the SEC has had, but the overreach also. So this is his first chance to truly get in the hot seat. I think he's going to bring some interesting fireworks to the interview and to the session there. So make sure, stay tuned right here. If you guys are not tuned into our channel, make sure and hit the little like button and the subscribe, because you'll get notifications when we go out on our live stream, all that kind of stuff. And if you're not part of our Diamond Circle, make sure and get in now. It's free and it's easy to get additional content from us, where we do content that doesn't make it here to YouTube. If you guys want to catch me on Twitter, it's out there at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechBat.